my thoughts around Bubble moving to more of a design-orientated mindset, where in the past it's just been blank canvas, go and create anything, and most things turn out to look like a monster. But Bubble is actually changing that, and they are going to be using, Flexbox is on the horizon, and just more sort of design-oriented tools. The editor is being redesigned, and I've seen the beta. It looks absolutely stunning. So I think it will start to appeal to more of a design-orientated audience. And when that happens, I project that Bubble's growth is going to be infinite, just because I suspect, depending how quickly Webflow can, catch up, because Webflow seriously lacks in the logic department compared to Bubble. And to get to where Bubble is today, it's been a rocky road. It's been a very buggy, rocky road. But their technique is just to, break things and get feedback and then fix things and move on. So they've moved at a blitz pace, but we'll see where it ends up. I think in the next 2-3 months, we're going to see some major design tools that start to appeal to the design audience.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. Later maybe we can hear a little bit more on the roadmap as well. That'd be great. But cool. I'll just officially start this thing. So welcome everyone. Really great to see you all here today. Some familiar faces off Twitter as well doing the challenge. So it's good to see you guys as well. Really excited to have Greg today for this session on demystifying responsive design in Bubble, which I think is probably a big pain point for a lot of us, or hasn't been a pain point because we haven't got there yet. But he's going to be talking us through that and hopefully giving us some tips and tricks on that process. Before that, he'll be just giving us an intro on what he does and his background. But yeah, that's it from me, and I'll hand over to Greg. But really looking forward to this one.
Thanks, Max. Great introduction. Yeah, so hi, folks. Really excited to be doing this. I was saying to Max before we started that I've kind of been operating behind the scenes for the last few years. I was sort of very active in 2016 on the Bubble forum. But I'll sort of give you my history, where I've been and where I intend to end up. Obviously, I'm trying to be more social, get involved with the community, which I kind of wish I started a long time ago. But anyway, I'm back and I'm happy to contribute. So my history is 2015, maybe 2014, starting to play with Ruby on Rails, looking at Python, becoming a bit more interested in the startup tech scene. My background is actually more design focused and photography, and I worked in a brand department for quite a long time. And I think I woke up at some point in 2016. I woke up with my wife, and I was living in central London, and I was just kind of tired of the routine. And I thought to myself, look, accelerators are starting to become, quite the hot thing to do. And I'd been listening to Y Combinator podcast for ages, for at least a year. And I found them very motivating, founder stories, but all very new to me. And as I said, I was tinkering with native code at the time. But maybe like some of you, where Bubble's been a start-stop process, that whole coding experience was a start-stop process. I became a bit sort of frustrated at the time it was taking to create anything. But then, I started to talk to some friends who are in tech. They said, look, there's this concept of a minimum viable product. Just create something. Once you've created that, try get into the hands of users. And I just, this was actually when I just met my wife. She came from a fashion background, and I was doing a lot of photography in the fashion space as well. And we thought to ourselves, Airbnb was just sort of taking off at the time. And we thought to ourselves, I wonder if we could create a marketplace that connects fashion models with businesses and with brands. Start small. That space I'd worked in for a few years, and people still use the phone to book models. On the modeling side and on the creative side, they were a younger audience and they're tech savvy. But on the industry side, it was an older crowd. So I knocked up. So I decided to just put my head down and just apply myself, and all the downtime I had, I taught myself. I knocked out an Ruby on Rails MVP. Didn't work very well though, but I created something that I could just demonstrate an idea. And it just, parts of it worked, most of it didn't work. I couldn't put this out into the field, but I thought, you know, why not just really take the plunge and just apply to some accelerator programs with the vision that, hey, if I get into an accelerator program, I'll get an advance, I'll get some money, and I'll hire a developer. Because I kind of prefer the design side, you know, my technical skills weren't that great. And so I applied to some accelerators in London and in the UK and in the US. And most of them I didn't hear back from, but one I did. One I did. And they were more intrigued about the business end. It was a bit of a mystery. And the numbers, you know, look great. If we could somehow disrupt the space, get a foot in the door, you know, grab 1% of the market, this could be quite a big business. So we went off to this accelerator interview. We first did an online interview that went quite well. And then we went off and met the founders of this accelerator program, talked to some investors. I still didn't think that we'd be accepted because, you know, there are hundreds of applicants, and my wife isn't tech at all. You know, she struggles to use a camera. And we were accepted based on this really shoddy MVP, which didn't really work. Just on the base of, you know, the business idea was quite good. We had relative experience. So now I had a problem, right? I have this terrible MVP. I can't really develop very well. And this accelerator program is starting and this accelerator program is starting in 1 month. And this was end of 2016. And I had, you know, I'd come across Bubble at this stage in Webflow. I think I had a Webflow account. I was wireframing in Sketch, you know, trying ideas in Webflow. But Webflow couldn't do what I needed to implement. So I thought, let me go back to Bubble. Let me just have another look. It doesn't look really great, but let me take the plunge, because, you know, I was aware that on the logic end, I could probably pull something like this off. I spoke to a few people on the forum who sort of convinced me, you know, just go for it, just try it. In the back of my mind, I thought, I'm going to this accelerator program with these like tech pros, these young tech guys, all like developing in Python and Rails, and you know, React Native was just coming out quite big at that stage. And then there's me, you know, not very tech orientated. How am I going to do this? Like, but long story short, we were one of the only companies to raise money from that accelerator program. And we managed to build, you know, we became a profitable business. We eventually ran out of money. We raised a small round from a VC. And we had too many business problems, basically. So we couldn't continue this company, because what happens is you get a seed round, you have targets. If you meet those targets, they chip in a bit more cash, see how far you can get. And on the business end, it didn't work for us in the end, but hey, the tech worked. It generated cash. So that was quite exciting. And then around about the time I could see that company was winding down in end of 2017, I was quite active on the forums, on the Bubble forum, and people started to, you know, contact me to say, Greg, I'd love to get your insight. You know, how did you build this marketplace? You know, how did you monetize this thing? How do you raise money? All this kind of coaching orientated advice. So I started coaching almost full time. I wound down that startup company, and then I just started coaching from a technical angle and from a business angle. And I did that for about, well, that was end of 2017 till about a year ago. And I was, you know, I've built a ton of applications for founders, and I've worked alongside them. And I've helped other people raise some money as well, connect with investors, that kind of thing. Right about the time that was happening, or prior to that happening, I did launch this little side business called nocoder.co. And I started teaching. And that was doing quite well. But I kind of thought that, you know, how can I become a good teacher if I don't have any real world experience, like significant experience? Sure, I'd raise money for my company and everything. But I still felt like I needed more breadth in my experience. So I sort of disappeared for a bit from the social side. Actually, no code wasn't even social at this point. It was more just a bubble forum. Kind of disappeared for a few years. And I launched, you know, 15, 20 applications with other founders. And through that experience, just really was able to stress test no code tools, what it can do, what it can't do yet. Worked with Bubble a bit on feedback. It was just a great experience. And then actually at the beginning of the year, I connected with a company called Escape the City. Max, you might actually know of them. I think Escape the City was basically in 2012, they launched, and they were the first British company to raise money from a crowdfunding business model. They were the first ones, and they became a huge company. They did really well. But over the years, they have been struggling on the innovation side. So I spoke to the founder at the beginning of this year, and he said, Greg, I've got a database of 250,000 people, and I want to rebuild a platform on Bubble. And I want it to be part social, part teaching. I want it to have a jobs board. And I just thought, don't know if this is possible. This is some serious scale. But anyway, we went for it. And I'm still working with a company, working with a founder, Dom Jackman, who just an inspiring guy. You know, he takes chances and risks, but they seem to be paying off. And we've been working on this platform entirely built on Bubble since January. The founder, Dom, had started before I came along, but it's now October 14th and we're just about to launch this thing. We've got a few thousand people across, but we're going to be scaling this to 8,000 people before the end of the year. And then hopefully to 20,000 people next spring. And then we're just going to keep going. So when people say to me, you know, what can Bubble do? Well, we're going to find out. Because I think this will be one of the biggest no-code applications ever launched that I know of on the Bubble end. So that's really my experience. And up until, say, July, no, actually, I guess around about the time COVID hit, I started to just get the appetite to start teaching again. So I launched buildcamp.io. And Buildcamp is going to be initially a Bubble-focused community platform for learning. I've had a bootcamp Udemy video for Bubble up for some time now. I pushed it live about 2 years ago, and you know, trickled along because the market size wasn't very big, but it's just gone exponential since COVID hit. Obviously, the no-code space has exploded. But that video is quite old, so I need to actually re-record that Udemy video at some stage. But anyway, I've pulled that video and I've got about 30 videos, and I'm launching my new community at buildcamp.io in the next couple of days. And it will be Bubble focused. There'll be some Stripe stuff in there, some Zapier, Integromat, the usual suspects. But it will be, the aim of this community is more technical, because I realize the people that do my courses, they're all in the same trajectory, really. They're all sort of starting out, have similar questions. So I've sort of, I've built a community. It's a bit like circle.so, maybe a bit of that, a bit of Discourse, a bit of Udemy, and it's a custom platform, and it can do most of what circle.so can do. And it's all built in Bubble, completely no code. So I'm going to be launching that pretty soon. And that brings me up to, brings us up to today. Just joined Twitter as well, just joined YouTube. I've never been huge on social, but so it's a whole new world for me, really. I'm quite excited with connecting. I guess, Max, that's where you and I met. So this wouldn't be happening unless I signed up to Twitter a few months ago. And yeah, just excited to be in this community, Max. I think you've done a great job. You're one of the first names that stuck out on Twitter. That's someone I should be connecting with, because you built your own community. So well done on that. So yeah, that's my story.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it, and it's really good to, like, that just in itself is like the dose of like inspiration that I was almost looking for, craving, just to get me back in the game. So I really appreciate you going through that and telling your story. But yeah, I guess now, yeah, for the even juicier stuff. So
yeah,
take it away.
Yeah. All right, let's share my screen. All right, so the theme is demystifying responsive design, but hey, I'm going to talk about design principles in general, because we all know what, well, we've heard what Bubble can do. And generally speaking, where Bubble shines, where it stands out, is in its logic. And the fact that you can just build things from a blank canvas. And a lot of people to the no-code space would say, well, a blank canvas is where it's fallen down. And I tend to agree with that. You know, I acknowledge that. It doesn't do everything for you. It doesn't really do, on the design front, doesn't do anything for you, really. But that doesn't mean it can't produce beautiful design. And the editor looks a little bit old school. You know, if you've come across from Webflow, and you used to the gloss of Webflow, Bubble's a different kind of company. Bubble is sort of a hacky company. 2 founders, great guys, started the company and ran it just with 2 of them for a long time. Webflow went and raised, hundreds of millions of dollars. Bubble didn't do that. It was just 2 guys. And the reason why they didn't do that is because what they'd built was so technical that they could not put it down to train people to help scale this thing. But they decided to raise money and have taken the plunge to do that. So with that, we've got some great design focused people working at Bubble. And this editor is going to look very different in the next sort of 3 months. The other great thing about Bubble is that you get access to backend workflows, and its API capabilities are amazing. You can connect with any API service. You don't have to use Zapier for anything. If you are good with API connections and with JSON, you can connect to any service. I'm an official bootcamp Bubble instructor, and one of my boot campers, we are helping him integrate with this real legacy jobs board in New Zealand, because we can connect to any service. So its server-side capabilities are amazing. Things like cron jobs, you can set off masses of batch data jobs at certain times of the day. You can automate all that stuff. You can do some really incredible stuff. But let me show you on the front end, because when we launch Bubble for the first time, and we create a page, this is what we get. And it looks a little bit daunting. We've got a blank white page. And the terminology is a little bit different as well, okay? You don't really see the terminology padding and margin. And this is where the secret to good design is that there is padding and margin, but it's just not obvious, okay? And what I tend to do, I'm just gonna grab a group, drop it on the page. Let's get to our actual page first, okay? Because if we talk about page widths very quickly, this is your starting point, the width of your page. And in coding, you don't really need to worry about this because you're not painting on a canvas, but we are painting on a canvas now. So there are a few decisions we need to make around pixel width. And I've tested all widths. If you start a blank page with Bubble, it's usually set to 1080. That's fine. You want to paint and draw on a 1080 canvas, that's fine. I used to start at 1440, which is quite wide. Getting 1440 down to 320 pixels for an iPhone SE It's quite a challenge. But I have settled on 1280, and I've just become familiar with design principles around 1280 because browsers are mathematicians, right? Everything works in percentages and numbers, ones and zeros. And we need to kind of think that way as well. We can't just be grabbing groups and dropping them on the page willy-nilly. Okay, we can't just grab this group and just put it there. That's not how browsers work. And you get help, you get sandboxed if you're using something like Glide or Adalo. You know, they really sandbox the ability to move elements around, and they do this for a reason, because that's the way browsers work. So they sort of lock you in. Bubble don't lock you into this. They assume that you maybe understand some of the principles of responsive design, which can be a challenge if you don't, right? So the way that you would start designing on a page is you have to think about content blocks. Because too often I find new bubblers doing this, grabbing a button, putting a button on the page. All right, great. This is going to be a sign up button, they'll say. And then, so they drop this on the page. They sort of try and center it a little bit by dragging everywhere. And then they go straight to the workflow. Okay, cool. Let's sign someone up. Great, this is going really well. Okay, we're managing to sign someone up. This is not how we should start. How we start is like this. We've got a content block. Here's a hero section. Okay. And by default, you can think of a group like a div, basically. It's the same thing. And groups can have groups inside, and we just use groups everywhere. Everywhere is a group, because a group helps us contain similar items. It's like a container. But it also provides our padding and margin, and it helps elements respond in the same way. So what I think about is, you know, maybe I'll go to Dribble, or I'll get inspiration from somewhere. And, you know, I want landing page inspiration. So what I tend to do is I'll be in Dribble and I'll look at a framework only, or a wireframe. I'll see a design, but I'll put everything in boxes. So all rows and columns and boxes. That's where we start. We don't start in this visual elements section. We start in the contained section down here. So let's pretend this is a hero image. So I'd make this hero image, or I want it to be full width, 1280. And then straight away, I'm going to uncheck fixed width. This will never work fixed width, okay? Browsers expand, contract. This doesn't work. So uncheck fixed width. And then maybe beneath this, what I'll do is I'll go copy paste. Let me change the color. So I have my next content block. Just checking that fixed width is not set. Perfect. Okay. Now, if I want 4 columns here, how do I achieve that? So I would grab a group, drop a group in. Just going to change the color so we can see it. And the natural instinct would be to try and divide this 1280 width into 4 parts. So you go copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. But what I would like to do is not do that. Because if we're at 1280, okay, if we're at 1280 and I want to chop this into 4 parts, but I do want some margin between these boxes, or between these containers. I'm going to call them groups. Okay, this is bubble speak now. So what we roughly want is one. I copied the wrong one here. Is copy paste, and then there'll be one more. This is generally what we want, and we want margin between these guys here. By the way, you can see this little preview of the pixel width here, I have a setting that I always use. This has stayed on since it was launched. It's called show distances on hover. So this is a very quick way to see distances between groups or your margin. All right, back to this. So how would I achieve, because this all plays into responsive design, okay? If you start creating groups by just dragging things in, and they'll be out by a few pixels, the padding is slightly out, well, responsively, that's going to look worse and get way worse when the page starts to contract or expand. That will exacerbate the problem very quickly. So naturally, what we want is the same dimensions for all of these groups. Now, this might seem obvious, specifically if you have a Webflow background. For people starting on Bubble, this is not obvious. They think miraculously Bubble will just make this work. Okay, it's not going to work. So let's go back to this calculator. Because if I have 1280, okay, I want 16 pixels of padding between all of these groups. So there's going to be 5 spaces. If I have 4 groups, there's going to be 5 spaces, 2 on the outside, 3 in the middle. So I would start with 16 times 5. That gives me 80. All right, so if the page or the group I'm working is 1280, well, I minus 80 to get 1200. So now we've removed all of the margin. We've subtracted the margin from this overall width. And then we just divide by 4 because I want 4 parts. So that leaves us with 300. So watch how quick this is. So we've got 300, copy paste, 300, copy paste, 300, I'll just whack that down there, copy paste, 300 again. Okay, I know I want 16 pixels of margin. So if I just align this up on the left to have 16 pixels, this guy on the right to have 16 pixels. And all I need to do is highlight these guys here, right click, I can't get to this tool now, right click and then distribute horizontally, bam, you've got it straight away. Okay, now we put the content in these groups. But before we get there, I'm just going to demonstrate some responsiveness on this. Okay, I'm just going to set this all down to 50% minimum width, which means I'm only going to allow these groups to shrink down to 50% until they need to break. But very quickly, if I hit the responsive editor, we've got responsive groups. Very quickly, okay? Now I can put my content in these groups. And what I tend to do, by the way, the 16 pixels theory is basically an Apple theory. They use 16 pixels of margin in their designs. I've just sort of adopted that. Now we can very simply just drop our content in here. Let's remove center horizontally. Let's grab some of this guy here. Oops, let's go back in here. And now we can just very simply drop our content. And the beautiful thing about putting things in these groups is that you can just uncheck fixed width on all of this content because the content inside the group is going to respond to the group responsive settings. Okay, the content inside the group will respond to the group's responsive settings as long as you don't have anything fixed width. So responsively, we've got our padding and margin. And this eludes a lot of people. It eludes people because we don't really see the terminology padding and margin anywhere. We forget about it, you know. And because we don't see it anywhere, we don't really do what I'm doing. We tend to really fight with the responsive engine. Let me see if I can find an image. Why didn't that work? Give me a second while I just sort of find an image somewhere. Images. Here's an image. All right, that's a huge image, so not sure what's happening here, guys. Let's just leave that for now. So you can put in, as long as all of these Let's see if this renders here on the front end. So you want to start off with your groups all the same. Now, if you want, what we can do is I'm on a really awful connection at the moment. I've moved to the countryside and it's pretty painful sometimes. So please just bear with me a sec. Okay. So if we wanted to create another group down here of different size, this is how you would do it. Okay. You wouldn't create the group this size. Responsibly, that's not going to work. Has to be that size because we want to retain the 16 pixels between. Oh, we can just keep going. Then we can do another one. Let me copy and paste this guy here. And if so these should have a max width. Let me max width these. So max width basically means don't go any wider than it is currently designed at. Okay, max width down here, 100%. I can increase the max width. I can say go 1.5 times wider than the current design, but I'm going to just lock it. I'm going to lock it down. So it can't stretch any wider, but it can narrow down. And now for this text to render correctly, let's bring this across and bring this across here. What I might do is just shrink this up. And I'm going to cut this off. But you get the idea here, right? We're putting things and we're grouping as much as we can, and it's acting responsibly. Okay, as we break down to smaller sizes, we can tell these groups when to break. You can see we've got 4 at the top here, and now we're down to 3. And if we went any smaller, it would be down to 2, but we can break that a bit sooner. We have the tools to do that. But this is really the secret. This is how you start. Don't jump in, don't throw in your images, your drop downs, drop in a repeating group. Just create the framework. If you put everything in these boxes, responsive design works out of the box. And I see a lot of people complaining, Bubble's not great for responsive design. It's fine. You just don't understand the concept of how browsers react to groups. Groups are containers. And unfortunately, padding and margin isn't really a word used often. I think they might use, we've got some padding here on text elements, but on image elements, you don't get padding and margin anyway. So you create it yourself. You create a group and you drop the elements in itself. All right, so let's just throw a few things in here. So can we put a button with text in a group? Well, yeah, of course we can. We can basically do anything Webflow can do. We can put the button there. This is sign up. Let's see if I can get an image in here now. Let's see if it'll allow me to upload an image. Plenish. Okay, we've got an image. Perfect. And we can do things like, I can turn this into a perfect circle. People always say to me, you can't even create a round profile image. Well, that's not true. We can definitely create a round profile image, but we have to start with a square first. If we start with a square, we can definitely get a round profile image. Set that to 100. And one of the tools I tend to use for responsive design is, I'm in Safari right now. Obviously, you can use Chrome developer tools. But I tend to, if I'm designing for a phone, I tend to use the responsive design mode in Safari, which is really nice. All right, we've got a few problems there. So naturally, I just have to make that guy a bit smaller. Let me try and get to, yeah. Maybe I can make these break a bit sooner, maybe 60 and 60. Okay, so sorry, I keep jumping across to my actual application, but so the responsive editor does a similar job. It does a similar job, and we've got some presets here. This is 375, so this is your standard iPhone. 414 you can drag it up to. That's a larger iPhone, and then 320 we can squeeze down to, which is the smallest phone in the market, iPhone SE. But this looks, straight out the box. If we're just putting content in here, responsively, this is all working. This is all working. Left align, push that down to the bottom. Buttons down here now. Left align that guy there. All fine. All right, Max, that's as much as I actually wanted to show. I just wanted to demonstrate the starting point, because Bubble gives you a blank canvas, no training wheels. Where do I start? And hey, where is my padding and margin? And can I just drag things onto the page? And the answer is you can drag something onto the page, but immediately you want to start lining that guy up using XY values in your inspector down here, and not just dragging things along, because again, if something is out by a pixel or two, that'll be exacerbated once you start stretching. That 2 pixel size then becomes 4, 6, 8. And if you start squeezing down, then things start to bump into each other. But if you start with a simple concept of create a wireframe in Bubble itself, create your wireframe, create just the boxes, just the content boxes, put everything in the content boxes, and then the responsiveness is taken care for you, basically. And there are other tools at our disposal here. We can do things like when we squeeze down a page, we can show and hide content on a conditional. So we can say, hide this box when page width is smaller than 414 pixels, and then collapse the margins and move and expand these 2 boxes on the right-hand side, which is kind of Flexbox functionality in itself, okay? That kind of responsive design is a little bit trickier to do, but hey, you can do it. It is there. It just happens that most of the community haven't really been able to implement these tools, and Bubble made the assumption that people would be able to discover this for themselves, and that hasn't been the case, which is why Flexbox is getting rolled out at some point. But the moral of the story is, all right, I've not done anything pretty here, but I've just tried to demonstrate wireframe first, before you get carried away with the logic, before you get carried away with throwing elements on a page. All right, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Greg. That was great. I reckon maybe just in case any questions sort of leave you maybe wanting to show a real-time example, maybe we keep the screen up.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, if you could just raise your hand on with the Zoom emoji, and then I can see in the chat, and I'll come
sure.
to you.
And while the question's being answered, I'm just going to flick across to my latest project, which is called Build Camp,
Sure.
which is a community
Sure.
I'm building basically based in Bubble, and it's fully responsive.
Wow, that looks awesome. Yeah, so I think we've got a question from Dan. Yeah, feel free to come off mute, Dan, and fire away.
Thanks very much, Gregory. And that was really interesting. Playing slightly devil's advocate, do you think it's worth waiting until Flexbox is ready, or like what would your approach be? Because I think the difficulty in some of this is, it seems not. It's still a bit difficult, but I guess the fact that you're showing this and how this works is incredible. And it's I don't know. What would you think would be a good place to start? Do you think it would be worth waiting?
That's a very good question, Dan. Hey, I would say Bubble there's a lot of parts, right? You've got the design part, which I absolutely love. I'm probably one of the only advocates of designing in Bubble because it's just a blank canvas. I love that. But then you've got the workflow, the logic to figure out, and you've got the database side to figure out as well. So I'd say just make a start. Start learning how Bubble operates. Play with the workflows. Learn how to sign people up, create accounts, create data, schedule emails to be sent. This is Pandora's box. It's just limitless. So don't be afraid of what I've shown you today, because actually, when it comes to some of my courses, I tend to teach people how to create logic before they actually learn how to create design. And through that process, while you're playing with your application, you'll naturally just start learning some of the tricks of the trade. And in any case, by that time, Flexbox would have been released, and some of these design challenges solved for you. But you got to start as soon as possible. All right, Bubble is going to be just light years ahead within the next 6 months, and the logic will take you longer to learn than the design side.
Cool, thank you very much. And out of interest, how long did it take for you to build BuildCamp? So
BuildCamp, yeah. So this is the community section. It has, I've got another. If you launch a course, it takes you off into basically like a Udemy sort of format, which is here. You can see I look a little bit different in this video. This was done about 3 years ago, but I've got basically Udemy functionality here, and you can, you've got your progress marker up here. You can ask questions. So this is like the Udemy part. If I go back, I'm going to answer your question in a second. I'm just sort of demonstrating what I've done. If I go back, this is the community section where I talk about, people do their introductions, got new tutorials, got our general section, whereas this will be technical talk, got our build in public, which really excites me. And I'm going to have an API where you can post your progress like I've done here straight to Twitter from BuildCamp, which is quite cool. You can update your projects. You got a task list here. You got various milestones. Now this, what I've built, I could probably sell this as a company itself. It does everything that a regular company built natively on React Native would do. Maybe it lacks 10% on performance, but that's going to be resolved very soon. And that kind of depends on how you build your app, what services you're using. I'm going to be implementing something called Algolia. And Algolia is basically the fastest technology on earth for search. All the big companies use Algolia. Airbnb use Algolia. And that's something that integrates with Bubble out the box. That's quite exciting, because that means if you've got 100,000 rows in your database, you can search for a term and get through that in under half a second. So that's pretty great. So this, BuildCamp, the learning section, I've had running under a different company called No Coder for a while, but I probably built this interface, 3-4 days, I'd say. I iterated over it for a while, perfecting it, but in terms of the logic, breaking things from courses into sections, into lessons, tracking lesson progress, responding comments, all of that kind of thing, it only took me a few days to build. The community section was a little bit longer, because I've tried to set out to build something better than circle.so. They pissed me off recently when I tried to get a favor from them, and I was like, I really want to integrate circle.so, and I love it. And those guys have done a great job. I probably spoke to the wrong person, but I decided to set out and build my own version. And actually I built something that I think integrates with my ideas a little bit more. It's a bit more sort of educational focused, and it ties into all of my content. What I am actually doing with BuildCamp is I'm going to be the lead Bubble educator, but I'm pulling in, a lead Webflow educator as well. And the idea is that we're going to try and create basically some of the best content out there based on our experience. And it'll just be a small subscription fee, and then you'll get full access to all the content. So I'm really pushing hard on this. And I've got a lot of signups, but I haven't actually launched this section yet. So all of these people are currently doing the courses. So yeah, if you asked that question, if you said to me, Greg, how long would it take you to build this? If I worked on this every single day from scratch, I could probably build it in a month. And that's user testing, that's integrated transactional emails, notifications. That's also the mobile. Something I forgot to mention, and I'm disappointed in myself. You have the ability to create a carbon copy of a desktop page redesigned for mobile and then serve that page to mobile devices. So I tend to do that for any page that is sort of like I have a mobile version of this dashboard, but I built that on a separate page just because I wanted it to be a little bit different. I didn't want this left-hand nav to be visible in page load. I want that to be a pull-out sidebar. I didn't want the users, they don't have the real estate for these users on the right-hand side. So I actually rebuilt it. And I have just a little condition that says if you load this page, this URL on your phone, it's going to send you in a split second. It's going to send you to the mobile design page. So that's very handy. And that will really help you solve the problem of trying to get a desktop page down to mobile if you're struggling.
Cool. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We've got a question from another Dan, Dan Tibmus. So yeah, feel free to ask your question, Dan.
Hey Max, thank you. Yeah, lots of Dans here. I had a few questions about managing heights. So you talked about managing widths. One thing I was familiar with in Webflow and from trying to learn code many times is doing things like setting a page or an element to 100% viewport height. Or even just managing, when content overflows. Could you talk a little bit about how have you got any tips, I guess, around doing things like that?
Yes, I do. There are a few techniques to this, Dan, and I'm glad you brought that up because Bubble can be a bit of a struggle with dealing with, responsive height. This is one of its flaws. But what I tend to do on some pages is actually stack content on top of each other, okay? And then you have the ability to collapse content down here. And I use a combination of collapsing content. What I also tend to do, let me know if I'm actually answering this question, is if I wanted to collapse half the height of this box on a various condition, I would drop another group in here. I would check this box that says collapse elements height when hidden, and it's not visible on page load, which means if I reload this page, this group will collapse to half the height. So if I had content up here, I could collapse the height that I wanted, basically using this little hack with boxes. Now, to answer your question, and with this technique, I've had this problem. It's not a problem for me, but I basically have this problem on my own website because I don't want this. I'm showing and hiding groups. This is a single page application. I'm showing and hiding groups, but now I have different types of, you see, I've only got 3 courses here. This one, the groups goes a bit higher. I still have this exact problem to solve. So I'm collapsing groups. I have groups beneath this hidden that basically will collapse. I've not quite finished it, but it will collapse. So you don't have any space left at the bottom. And I should be demonstrating this on the mobile site because that's where I've actually implemented it. I've not implemented it here. So you use collapsing groups on conditions to collapse height. To answer your first question on 100% viewport height, you would need to use CSS for that. You'd have to drag in a HTML element, which is available. So by the way, if you folks don't know, you can actually implement custom HTML on a page, CSS, and you can run JavaScript to do certain things. All the plugins in the plugin section are JavaScript plugins. So you can do that yourself. And there are a few people and a few posts on the forum about 100% viewport height, and it is achievable with some custom CSS.
Awesome, thanks.
Cheers, yeah, that's a great question, great answer. Maiko, I'll come to you.
Hi, Gregory, thanks very much. You mentioned that with BuildCamp, you're also going to have an instructor on Webflow. So I'm keen to dig a bit deeper on the main advantages of each, and when would you rather go for Webflow rather than Bubble, and when would you go for Bubble? just for background, like I've been a bit on a journey. I used to build a lot of WordPress websites. Now I moved on to Webflow, which I like. It's a bit more of a blank canvas and customizable, but then this seems even more so. So obviously I don't want to kind of choose the wrong tool, but would love to learn a bit more about that and what your thoughts.
Yeah, good question, Maiko. And this really depends what you're trying to build, to be honest. I gave an example at the start of the session where I had built a marketplace application. And at that time, I know that, you know, everyone's excited about stacks in Webflow, this stack, WASM stacks and member stack. And with Bubble, you don't need any stacks. You don't need any stacks. You just need Bubble. That integrates with Stripe, it integrates with Zapier out of the box. With Webflow, Webflow doesn't have near enough conditionality and workflow logic for me to build any of the company ideas that I've been wanting to build or have built, okay? Now, I'm not a Webflow person. I'm trying to get back into it because I can see the advantages of spinning up an absolutely stunning looking Webflow site quite quickly, maybe a member site or something like that. But Maiko, if you want any kind of custom, or if you want to build something new, like you would in native code, you would choose Bubble. Because I don't think you're going to be able to create a groundbreaking new company in Webflow. It just doesn't have the logical conditionality to do that. And it doesn't have access to server-side workflows, and it doesn't have access to batch jobs and all that kind of stuff. Like, please correct me if I'm wrong, any Webflow experts, but I'm keeping my eye on Webflow, and I just haven't seen the logic side come anywhere near close to what Bubble can actually do, which is basically anything. And if you have a little bit of coding experience, you can extend Bubble's capabilities on the front end with a bit of custom HTML and CSS, which I've actually done with the company I'm currently working for, Escape the City.
Interesting. It seems to me like Webflow is really made more for websites and, you know, the kind of competitor to WordPress. And here you could almost build like any sort of software SaaS business through it, right? Or almost.
Basically, almost anything. You can build SaaS companies, and I've monetized, you know, over 10 companies across a wealth of ideas in Bubble. Does Bubble have limitations? Yeah, it has limitations. Yeah, for sure. Specifically, actually, on the front end, it has limitations. But again, if you have a little bit of coding knowledge, you can lift those limitations.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great. There isn't anyone else with any questions in the chat, but I guess I'll just open it. Oh, we've got one. Yeah, feel free to go for it. How do you say your name? Is it?
I knew that's why you paused a bit. Yeah, it's Chinadum.
Yes. Okay.
No
awesome.
worries. Gregory, the last point you just made now, you said it's fairly straightforward for someone that has a bit of knowledge in coding. I'm completely a novice in all of it, which is why I love the idea of no coding. Just in terms, would you recommend this for people that are just starting off in terms of putting their ideas into a product? How would you attract a transition or a step-by-step? How would someone that's completely a beginner go about it?
Yeah, good question, actually. So when I talk about Bubble having a few advantages over, you know, other platforms, because it allows you to do some custom coding, you don't have to do any coding. And when I work with other founders, I explicitly imply to them, don't install plugins if you don't have to. Don't try to do any native code if you don't have to. Like, you need a really good reason to do it. Don't come to me and say, you know, this button isn't doing the correct hover. I'm going to custom CSS this guy. No, that's okay. If you're serious about building a business, the hover button really doesn't matter. So you don't need to use custom code at all. I just gave the advantage that you can extend its capabilities with custom code.
Okay.
The beautiful thing about Bubble is it's a visual drag and drop, but the workflow editor is very intuitive. Okay, it's very intuitive. How do I sign someone up? Or I click here, I go to account, and I click on sign someone up. Step 1. How do I create some data? Well, I create a new thing. I create a new blog. And I've got my key value pairs down here. Very, very intuitive. How do I send an email? Well, I go down to email and I click the button send email. So it's coding in the English language. It's just removed the syntax, and it's given us a language that we can understand. Now, building applications is obviously difficult regardless of whether we're using the English language or not. It is, right? Building applications is hard when you first start. So your journey is going to be hard, but this tool set is a tool set you want to use. You really do want to use it because it lifts the lid on any, you know, no code can be seen as a bit of a toy. Bubble is not a toy. Bubble is it's production software.
Okay, appreciate it. I just wanted to kind of clarify the use of the terminology in that sentence.
Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Has anyone got any other questions? I can't see any, but yeah, I know we're just hitting the hour, but I'm sure we can trickle over if we got any other questions.
I actually had one quick question.
Sure.
Hi, Gregory. Thanks a lot for that demo. That was great. I'm also a bit of a newbie. I'm on day 15 of my 100 days of no code. So like Chinedum, I'm very, very new to this, but I've bought your Udemy course and I've given it, I've had like the first hour or two I've watched. So when you said that you needed to update it, one of the questions that popped to mind was, what do you see has changed since you made that video and now in those 3 years?
So a small amount of functionality has changed. I was talking about the company has been, you know, ebbing along because just the two technical founders not wanting to put it out, you know, raise money and build a team around it. So actually not much has changed, Samuel. I've grown a beard and I've grown my hair since then, so that's a little bit different. But it has almost all of the functionality aside from a few bits and pieces. Look, whatever you purchase now, that's a lifetime purchase, and that course will be updated. This tab will be missing in the course called option sets. It's a very simple concept, option sets. We won't go into it now, but for instance, this is missing. And just a few little bits and pieces, but the premise of that Udemy course is, it is a bootcamp in itself, because it really gives you an idea about workflow logic, database design, how to set up your database, and it covers all of the functionality you need to build any app. Doesn't matter what you're building, I cover all of those topics. It just so happens that we're building a project task manager, because I've discovered that the data structure for a project task manager is basically the most common structure that exists across all apps. So I'd recommend that you keep pushing with that video. I'm waiting for Bubble to release a new editor, which, you know, I was told it would be June and it's October now, and I think it might only be in January. So as soon as that editor drops, I'm re-recording all of the content and bringing it up to date. But hey, you have that video for life now. You've bought it, and I think you just crack on. Just, you know, let's not make excuses to not make progress.
Absolutely.
Because I've been recording these videos, very well known. I've recorded another 15 hours of content, recorded these videos knowing that Bubble is releasing a new editor, and I'm going to have to re-record these videos again. But we need to push on, don't we? So that's
absolutely.
what I'm. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for that response. Cheers.
My pleasure.
Sorry, I have another question. What can you tell us about the new features, the new like Flexbox engine and all of that good stuff that's potential?
Yeah. So not a hell of a lot at this stage, because we get a monthly update from one of the founders, Josh Haas, who is otherwise quite quiet. And Bubble doesn't have the best reputation for delivering when they say they're going to deliver. Okay, so they keep pushing the boundaries, and they keep being held to account by the community saying, you promised Flexbox and it's not released yet. So I don't know when that is coming, but I know it will be I think the first quarter of next year. The editor redesign, I've got an inkling, will be a Christmas present. And they have some really big infrastructure upgrades also coming down the pipe, which means that our applications will be loading a lot faster. But they're also sort of, you know, you might pick up via the grapevine that people complain some Bubble applications are a bit slow. They're not slow. I can show you lightning fast applications. It's because you're trying to load too much data and page load, and you're not following the basic principles of application design. Again, Bubble is an interesting beast, right? It's a blank canvas in terms of design, workflow steps, database design. This is why I started focusing on education, because I saw a massive gap in the market. Bubble wasn't educating for a long time. They're just starting to educate now, and I'm helping them with some of that. So I think when they pick up on the education, much like Webflow did an incredible job with education. And as such, you know, they can move quite quickly and they don't have as many support requests to respond to. But yeah, I think just crack on and don't worry about what's coming down the pipe. Just get stuck in, because there's some exciting stuff, but there will always be some exciting stuff coming down the pipe. I guess the big question is, when is there going to be native mobile development support? And that was on a roadmap that's disappeared from 2015, and that's been pulled. And this is more of an iOS issue. You know, Glide is still not, I think, is Glide, can you push something to the iOS store? I'm not sure. Sorry?
I don't think so, not yet.
Yeah. So when Apple becomes friendlier towards no code, pretty sure we'll be able to build native iOS apps. I've actually built one in Bubble itself. I hacked my way through it, but it's on the iOS store. So you can actually do it. So Dan, get started. Honestly, get started.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great. Cool. For not wanting to take any more of your time, Greg, but that was really great. Yeah, I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the people that couldn't make it will once the video is shared. But yeah, any like final thoughts, any closing remarks you have, Greg, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I would say knowing Webflow and knowing Bubble is probably a good thing, you know, both of them. Why? Because, for instance, my wife wants me to design her a new shop front for her. She wants to come off Etsy or Shopify, and she wants sort of something native. And I'd probably choose Webflow for that, just because it's probably a bit quicker to build something like that. So I think having Webflow and Bubble knowledge together is an advantage, and I would have picked Webflow for a few of past projects if I had enough experience with it. And I actually intend on tooling up and getting someone involved in build camp for Webflow education. Learning Bubble will really lift the lid on capabilities, and you can apply to an accelerator program. You can raise money with Bubble. This is one of the only applications you'll be able to do that with, because you don't even have to mention you're using Bubble. I know it's been a thing of the past. It's not anymore. I was a bit afraid to mention that I was a no coder in my accelerator from 2016. People didn't even know what the term was. They thought it was kind of some sort of toy. But I tell you what, Bubble is not a toy anymore. It was 4 or 5 years ago, but get involved. If you really want to raise money in the future or create something unique, I think the key feature here is unique. You can only do that in Bubble. You can't do that on any other no-code platform.
Great, that's a good message to be left on. And yeah, thanks so much for your time, Greg. It was really immense. And yeah, and thanks everyone for coming. I hope you got some value from it. I definitely did. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm sure if you send them to me, then I can maybe throw them over to Greg as well afterwards. But yeah, thanks so much, guys, for coming. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all on Twitter and the Slack community and all that stuff. But yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.